Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Shabbat Shalom.
Chodesh Tov.
Chodesh Tov.
Today we read a double portion, Matot-Masei, and it ends the book of Numbers. And I want to think for a moment about how the book of Bamidbar ends, this journey in the wilderness, right? There are two concepts that really come out of these twin portions of Matot and Masei. Masei, which is actually the section that we're going to be reading from today in the triennial, is the journey. It actually goes back and describes all of the different points, all the different moments as we went through the desert in this very detailed itinerary as we go through. We'll see that in the second half of this Parsha. Matot, on the other hand, begins with the idea of the power of words, specifically vows. So if we look on page 941, we will see Vaydaber Moshe el Roshei Hamatot, that Moses speaks to the heads of all the tribes, saying, this is what the Lord has commanded. If a man makes a vow, and I'm going to keep it male for a moment, if a man makes a vow to the Lord or takes an oath imposing an obligation on himself, he shall not break his pledge. He must carry it out all that has crossed his lips. And then the Torah actually goes in to talk about the difference between a vow made by a male and a vow made by a female, because in that time, the legal status of men and women were very different. And so a vow made by a male, as we see here, is something that cannot be broken. A vow made by a female, which is what's going to happen in the next few paragraphs, can be broken either by her father or by her husband, depending on where she's living. And that's a whole different conversation about then versus now and the sexism of the Bible, not what I want to get into. I actually want to talk about the power of words and the power of a vow, and let's actually now in the modern world say if a man or woman makes a vow, and we'll go in that direction. So what does this mean, and why do we think this section, or this halacha, this law, is sort of what ends our journeys and ends the book of Bamidbar? What do we learn from it? That's your cue, by the way. Marge.
Well, maybe the ending is that kind of very strong statement that what you say, everything that's been in here, and then what you take and what you say, what you commit to, will make the world go forward. And if you don't, the world will fall apart.
So perhaps, I think I like the way that you're understanding, and perhaps Marge is saying, we've just sort of gone through, we've learned all of these things, we've gone through Exodus, we've gone through the laws, we've gone through everything. Look, what you say, we said not too long ago, Na'aseh v'nishma, we will do and we will listen. That has power. That commitment that we made to God, to each other in the community, that has power. And we have to live up to that. Okay? Michal? Okay? So Michal is arguing that this really focuses us on the individual, that each individual has a role to play, has a purpose, and has power within the larger community based on what we say. Okay?
Well, you kind of touched on that, but I was going to say, yes, it's an individual that's making this vow or oath, a neder or shvuah, yet it has
community and for our family. So the Torah does not look favorably on these vows. In fact, when you're done with your nazirut, your vow to be a nazir, you bring a korban chatat, and they're like, don't, because vows are just, and these are vows also that are made in God's name.
Right.
They're holy vows. It's not like, oh, I'm never going to eat sugar again. I mean, this is
So the Torah here is trying, the Torah here is trying to warn us of how important these vows are. And I think you're right, Diana. That our tradition doesn't look favorably on making vows. As a matter of fact, there's a whole section in the Talmud, right, that deals with vows, and it's very detailed and very specific, and really creates this sense of it's almost more difficult to do it than not to do it. When dealing with gittin, when dealing with divorces, right, the vows, the conditions that we place on it are very complicated. And frankly, it's just easier to say we don't do that. Traditionally, in Judaism, we don't make vows anymore. We did back then, but we don't make vows anymore. Some people take that so, to such a degree that when if you're in a civil court and they're asking you to swear, they now say, do you swear or affirm, right? You can say, I affirm, so you don't take a vow. You don't swear in that sort of way. So this is serious business here. Yeah.
I feel like maybe we're at the point in the story where we're passing the torch, where God is less responsible for us and we become more responsible for ourselves.
Yeah, there's this transition of God being less responsible for us, we being more responsible for ourselves. Therefore, we better be paying attention to what we're saying and what we're doing. Okay? Anybody else? Huh? Correct. Even in that time where we clearly was a difference between the genders, right? Even if you say that the vows of a woman have less status, it's only for a short period of time that the husband or the father can come in and negate it. Otherwise, that stands too, and now they're obligated to that. So, the power of words is something that is being brought forward here at the end of this parsha, or the end of this book of the Torah, in a very meaningful way. And I want to think about the power of words in today's day and age. Because the reality is, words seem to have much less power, at least the spoken words, than they did, right? If we're making a deal, if we're coming to an agreement, in today's day and age, especially here in the United States, a handshake really isn't good enough. You got to get it in writing. The words that we say, the commitment that we make, isn't enough to be held necessarily. And there are lawyers in the room, and maybe you can make an argument to say, okay, you can hold somebody to their word, but it's a lot harder, certainly, than we did back then. The power of our words today, when we think about social media, we think about the non-accountability, right? We can say anything we want anonymously. It doesn't really matter. It can be true, it can be not true. There's really no remediation for that. It's scary. We've lost this sense of the power of our words. And then, let's take it even a step further, right? The rabbis speak about not only the power of our words, but the power of Lashon HaKodesh, right? The holy tongue. And you'll know that there are groups of people who won't speak in Hebrew unless they're praying or studying, right? They'll speak Yiddish, they'll speak something else, but they reserve Lashon HaKodesh, the holy tongue, Hebrew, for special moments and holy moments. So it's not just the power of the words that we say, but it's actually even the power sometimes of the language in which we are saying it. So when we think about all of that, and we combine that with the fact that we are now entering into the month of Av, all of this sort of came together for me in a powerful way this week. Last night I actually taught a little bit about the Talmudic dictum. When the month of Av comes in, we limit our joy. We don't eliminate it, we don't decrease it, we don't get rid of it. We limit our joy. And how do we limit our joy? Well, we limit our joy sometimes by looking around in the world and being cognizant of what's really going on. And so, this past week, when 50 Jewish teens who were traveling home from a summer program were removed from a Spanish airline because they were singing in Lashon HaKodesh, they were singing in Hebrew, it brings this all together for me in a powerful and somewhat scary manner. Right? The power of words, not to help and to promote, but actually to have those words of Lashon HaKodesh, those words in Hebrew being used against us to say that that's bad, right? How dare these teens sing in Hebrew? And it was considered to be, what was the charge? The charge was they were disturbing the peace, right? They were creating a ruckus. Now, by the way, it's very possible that teenagers are disturbing the peace. I've seen it before, okay? But the response to these teens by the authorities, the response that was caught on video by some of the airline staff highlighting anti-Semitic statements, saying Free Palestine, right? All those sorts of things showed this was not just a bunch of teens creating a ruckus that they couldn't control and needed to get off the flight. Add to that the 21-year-old counselor who was with them, who was actually arrested, was released on condition that she sign an NDA. She can't talk about why she was arrested or what was going on. So you put all of that together, and we see how important words can be and how much of an effect they can have, right? The question is now, well, what do we do? Right? The point of all of this, the point of having people yell us down when we say something that shows that we are Jewish, when we say something that celebrates our Judaism, when we sing our Hebrew songs to show that pride in our Judaism, the point of other people coming and getting us to not say those words is to diminish us, is to diminish who we are, to diminish our ability to be Jewish in this world. And I think that as we find ourselves in these 9 days, this act of diminishing joy, it leads to Tisha B'Av. Now, from a Jewish perspective, that's intentional. It's a way to take away, to strip away who we are normally so that we can actually spend time with our sadness. Because that's not, for most of us, where we normally are. It takes effort, and it takes work, and it takes intention to be able to feel that pain and feel that sadness. And so we spend these 9 days, well, really the 3 weeks, but let's focus on the 9 days, stripping away some of that. And we're doing that to ourselves so that we can truly feel the power and the impact of Tisha B'Av. It's very different when other people in the world are doing it to us. But the intention, by the way, is the same. Those people who were the perpetrators of this didn't want to see those kids enjoy the fact that they were Jewish. They didn't want to see that joy. That joy in their Judaism is what bothered them. It's what made them say, that can't be. And they stripped away the voice. They stripped away the joy. They stripped away the music. Something that we're going to do on Tisha B'Av, right? That's part of what we do for ourselves as we lead services, as we have services, and we strip away the music, the celebration. Our voices, our words, our celebration is critical to who we are as Jews. And those words mean something. And I think as we go back to the beginning of Parashat Matot, and we talk about the meaning of vows, it's not just about the vows. It's the Torah telling us our words matter. Our words matter. What we say matters. We should be aware of it. We should be intentional with it. And we should celebrate it. Because when we don't, or when we are unable to, we find ourselves in these 9 days of Av leading up to the destruction and leading up to Tisha B'Av. Barbara.
On Saturday night, when we do the service, you don't sing it, you say it, but then when we have the scroll, and we sing it, 5 chapters.
It is true. So we don't, when we're davening, when we're praying, we don't use music. When we read the book of Echa, right, we actually do use music, but it's a very particular music that is only used on Tisha B'Av, right? It's also in the minor, it's mournful, it's got that feeling to it that is actually meant to help focus us on that. But the normal joy that we feel, and you guys, you felt it a little bit today. I could feel as I was davening Hallel today, there are a few people that's like, no, let's go. And I intentionally slowed it down a little bit. I intentionally pulled a little bit of the joy out of it because we're in Av. We're in Av. But yes, I would agree with you, but there's an intentionality to the music that we do. Yes.
I would also like to say, I think it's a little bit different this year too, because, well, for the past 563 days, every time I put on my tag, my Bring Them Home tag, or I go onto Instagram, and I do now limit it to 10 minutes. I literally set a timer, 10 minutes, that's it. Because I know most of it's going to be pretty depressing. Sometimes I feel like we just can get that little glimmer of joy wherever we can find it, because we're just reminded every single day right now of the destruction.
Well, and that's the intentionality, right? That's the intentionality of those people who are fighting against Israel, fighting against us as Jews, are trying to remove that joy. They're trying to remove the joy, and that's what happened on this airline, right? That when Jewish children, when Jewish youth were being joyful in their Judaism, that had to be stopped. That had to be stopped. And our response, by the way, is to sing louder. Right? That's always been the Jewish response. We sing louder. We sing stronger. We be public in who we are, and we don't allow for that to take it away, because once it does, we lose the control over that. then they set the terms of who we are as Jews, telling us where we can be Jewish and where we can't be Jewish, how we can be Jewish, how we can't be Jewish, how we define our own religion in our own terms. If we don't speak out to do that, if we don't use our words to do that, then somebody else will. So the two parts of our parsha, the power of words and the journeys that we go on, combine in a very unique way at the end of Bamidbar and at this moment in our time as we are coming into the month of Av and approaching Tisha B'Av next Saturday night. Shabbat Shalom.